So I think the biggest issue regarding the legislation around digital assets is lack thereof. There is not so much legislation, or there hasn't been until this year, to help companies and entrepreneurs understand what rules they're playing by. And so it means that there's a bit of stifling of innovation because we're not really sure what we're allowed to do, in what jurisdictions we're going to be comfortable, where we can accept investment from for the growth of our companies, and how we can trade our assets once we've created them. So I think it's incredibly important that over the next 6 to 12 months, most of the countries around the world are going to be creating legislation probably for the first time, or they're going to be reforming some of the reactionary and negative legislation that they might have put out in the past. I think as a blockchain industry, we've reached a tipping point where we're no longer going to be sidelined. It's no longer something that might disappear or fail. This is something real that is going to be implemented by the private and public sector everywhere around the globe. So it's important for people in our industry to have a say on what that legislation looks like, so we can say this is the type of legislation that is going to help us to grow, to innovate, and our governments and the private sector should be supportive of that. In order to help solve those issues, what we're doing is working with some of the most important people in the industries that we're looking to disrupt, not just individuals from the blockchain industry, but also innovators from all of the different industries, from healthcare to education to supply chain, to figure out how we can work together to implement blockchain technology and what legislation to allow that and allow the growth of that will look like. And working together, it means that we're coming up with common sense legislation that makes sense for everyone and is to everyone's benefit. There's quite a few. I mean, I would say the most popular jurisdictions these days are obviously first Switzerland. They had the first mover advantage and have probably the most protective and open-minded sets of laws governing distributed ledger technology. Could also say Gibraltar. Bahamas have been making a lot of noise these days. Obviously Estonia, where they're developing their e-residency program. I understand Lithuania is looking to build something similar. And obviously Wyoming. It's the only state in the United States that has blockchain legislation that has defined tokens and utility tokens and what that asset class means, how we can govern our tokens as our property, what that means in terms of taxes. And I think that has set an example for not just other states in the US, but other countries around the world that haven't yet legislated on blockchain. I would say the best advice I can give is always to have a good set of lawyers. Don't just talk to one, talk to more than one, and figure out where you're most comfortable, that you have the right team to work with, that you know that you have access to a bank that is friendly to those using blockchain. There are still some traditional financial institutions that are uncomfortable with digital assets, and you want to make sure that you are building a business on the most solid foundation. You have the right laws and regulations in the state that you're working in or the country that you're working in. You have banks that you can work with, because you're obviously still going to have to use fiat currencies in some situations, and that you are comfortable that if you decide to stay in that jurisdiction, that you can grow for the next few years, and you have legislators that have your back and want to support you as an entrepreneur. I also am a co-founder of a blockchain advisory called Bueno Capital. We are an Estonian company that's actually based in Zurich. Again, two of my favorite legislative frameworks at the moment, and advising blockchain companies around the world on how to grow, how to find the right advisors in order to actually be able to craft real solutions for industries is something that is incredibly important to me. Sometimes I've seen in the blockchain industry where there's a solution that's created and then they want to retrofit it for an industry. I think it's very important for us to engage with industry leaders outside of the blockchain space to make sure that any solution that's being created is actually filling a pain point and solving something for them. And the more that we can do that, I think the more success we'll see out of the companies that are coming out of the space.